beyond disappointed. I gave up so much, from time with my daughter to time with my family, and I
What
put
do you think the one thing you can do as an entrepreneur to stand out? Because everyone has ideas, everyone's trying to get off the ground, and we know this is.
So you also studied neurology. And so
Yes.
you look at sport a little bit differently than the regular
Yeah.
athletes that didn't study neurology. Serena and I. Okay.
The broken promise. The secret heartbreak Serena Williams kept hidden from the world. She won 23 Grand Slams. She stared down the most fearsome competitors on planet Earth and made them flinch. She built a dynasty so powerful that her name alone made opponents nervous before a single ball was struck. She redefined what athletic greatness looks like, sounds like, and walks like. But here is the secret that the highlight reels never showed you. The part that the trophy ceremonies and the standing ovations and the magazine covers all conspired to hide. The deepest, most gut-wrenching heartbreak of Serena Williams' legendary career had nothing to do with losing a match. It had everything to do with a promise. One solemn, sacred promise she made to herself that, when the moment of truth finally arrived, she had no choice but to keep, even though keeping it shattered her completely. Welcome back to Chatterbox, the only place on the internet where we go past the headlines, past the PR spin, past the carefully managed social media posts, and straight into the raw, real, unfiltered truth behind the icons you love. I'm so glad you're here today, because this story is one for the ages. This is not just a sports story. This is a story about sacrifice, about a mother's love, about a champion's pride, and about what happens when the greatest athlete of her generation is forced to face the one opponent she could never truly defeat, her own human body. So get comfortable. Pour yourself something strong, because we are going all the way in on Serena Williams, and by the time we're done, you're going to see her in a completely different light. Let's start at the very beginning, because to understand the heartbreak, you first have to understand the empire. You have to understand what Serena Williams built, what she represented, and why every single setback hit her 10 times harder than it would hit anyone else. Because when you are the greatest, when you have spent your entire life operating at a level that no other human being has ever reached, stepping back, even for a moment, even for the right reasons, feels like dying just a little bit. Serena Williams did not just become a tennis champion. She became a revolution. She and her sister Venus didn't walk through the doors of professional tennis so much as they kicked them completely off the hinges.
I feel like there was a period though where you were invincible and I couldn't play better than
Yeah.
you. It was like a 2
I think
year
that's when I went
period.
through my breakup.
Oh, I wish
Yeah.
I would.
Arrived at a sport that was largely white, largely European, largely conservative, and largely unwilling to welcome two young black girls from Compton, California, with open arms. And what did they do? They absolutely dominated it anyway. Together, they rewrote every rule, broke every expectation, and built a sisterly dynasty that the world had never seen before and will almost certainly never see again. During her absolute peak years, Serena was not just great. She was terrifying. She was the kind of player who could make your knees buckle before you even stepped onto the court, simply because you knew what was coming. That serve, that thunderous, screaming 128-mile-per-hour serve, was the most lethal weapon in the history of the sport. Her forehand could strip paint off the baseline. Her mental toughness was ironclad, almost supernatural. And her competitive fire? It burned so hot that even her closest allies sometimes had to step back from the heat. And speaking of that fire, here is where things get absolutely fascinating. Because in late 2025, Serena did something she had never really done before. She got unfiltered. She and Venus launched their brand new podcast called Stockton Street, named after the street in Compton where they grew up and where their entire story began. And sitting across from her sister, laughing and swapping stories like only two people who have shared an entire lifetime together can, Serena finally let the curtain fall on some of her biggest secrets. One of the juiciest? The real source of her most invincible era on the tennis court. You would think it was a revolutionary training regimen, right? Maybe a new coach who cracked her technique open. Maybe some groundbreaking nutritional program. But no, not even close. Serena Williams, 23-time Grand Slam champion, confessed with a laugh that the secret weapon behind her most dominant stretch of tennis was a bad breakup. A painful, messy, devastating romantic split that lit a fire inside her the likes of which no coach, no trainer, and no motivational speech could ever replicate. She took that heartbreak, she swallowed it whole, and she turned it into pure, ruthless, court-dominating fuel. And Venus, bless her soul, heard the story and immediately said with that dry humor of hers, "I feel like there was a period where you were invincible and I couldn't play better than you. I wish I would have broke up with someone."
In sports, to be a champion, you have to have brutal honesty.
Yeah.
If you're not honest with yourself and completely open, you can't hide from yourself. You can't.
That is the Williams sisters in a nutshell. That is the chemistry, the humor, the honesty, and the unbreakable bond that has defined them for decades. But that same ferocity, that same refusal to ever admit weakness, that same burning need to compete and conquer at all costs, it became a double-edged sword the moment Serena's body started pushing back. And the body always pushes back eventually. No matter how powerful you are, no matter how much willpower you have, biology does not negotiate. Now we need to travel back to September 2017, because this is where everything changes. Serena Williams gives birth to her daughter, Alexis Olympia. It is supposed to be the most joyful chapter of her life, and in so many ways it is. But what few people fully grasp is how close that moment came to being a tragedy instead of a triumph. The birth was complicated in ways that were genuinely life-threatening. Serena developed blood clots in her lungs, a pulmonary embolism, and spent 6 weeks bedridden and fighting her way back to health. 6 weeks, lying still, unable to move, unable to train, unable to compete. For a woman like Serena, that alone must have felt like a kind of slow torture. And the recovery was brutal. She spoke openly about the physical and emotional toll it took, about the moments when she wasn't sure she was going to make it back.
I don't like the word retired, but when I evolved from tennis, I had already been investing for, I don't know, like 8 years at the time. I'd already had my firm.
But here is the thing about Serena Williams that you absolutely need to understand. She has never, in her entire life, allowed, "I'm not sure," to be the final answer. Not once. So she got up. She did the work. She endured the pain of rebuilding a body that had just been through the ringer. And she set her sights back on the tennis court, because for Serena, the court was always home. She announced her comeback with the kind of quiet confidence that only the truly great possess. She was going to Roland Garros for the 2018 French Open, just 6 months after giving birth and nearly dying. The sporting world collectively held its breath. Some people cheered. Some people skeptically raised an eyebrow. Some people privately doubted. And Serena, in true Serena fashion, paid exactly zero attention to any of it and just went to work. The early rounds at Roland Garros went well enough. She was rusty in places, visibly working to find her rhythm. But she was there, she was competing, and she was advancing. And with every match, the anticipation built.
And with a sense for the dramatic, Serena Williams finishes 2013 in grand style and completes the...
Because the draw had set up what would have been one of the most spectacular, storyline-laden matchups in the history of the tournament. Waiting for Serena in the 4th round was none other than Maria Sharapova. Now, if you know anything about women's tennis over the past 2 decades, you know exactly what that matchup means. The Serena-Sharapova rivalry is one of the most layered, most charged, most talked about rivalries in all of sport. On the surface, it was simply 2 elite competitors at the top of their game. But beneath the surface, it was so much more complicated than that. There was history there. There was tension there. There were things said and unsaid over the years that gave every single match between these 2 women an extra layer of electricity that you simply could not manufacture. Sharapova had only just returned to the tour herself after serving a 15-month doping ban, a return that had been enormously controversial and had divided the tennis world right down the middle. The prospect of these 2 women, both fighting their own battles to reclaim their place at the top, records. It was, to put it plainly, box office gold. And Serena wanted it. She wanted that match desperately. Not just for the competitive thrill, not just for the ranking points, but because beating Maria Sharapova had always meant something specific to Serena. It was a statement. It was a declaration. It was her way of saying, "I am still here. I am still the queen, and nothing, not childbirth, not blood clots, not 6 weeks in a hospital bed, can change that. But the body had other plans. During her third-round victory at the tournament, Serena felt something wrong in her right pectoral muscle. A sharp, alarming, unmistakable pain every single time she tried to wind up and deliver that serve. And the serve is not optional for Serena Williams. The serve is the cornerstone of her entire game. It is the weapon that sets up everything else. Without it, she is not just diminished, she is a fundamentally different player, and not the kind that wins Grand Slams. She pushed through the match. She competed on pure adrenaline and determination and the sheer refusal to give in. But behind the scenes, everyone around her knew something was seriously wrong. So she made one last desperate attempt to test herself before making the hardest decision of her comeback. She and Venus suited up for a doubles match together, Serena's shoulder heavily taped, her arm wrapped up like a boxer's fist before a fight. She tried every variation of her serve she could think of, different angles, different speeds, different grips, anything to find a delivery that didn't send a bolt of pain shooting through her chest. The results were alarming. Her serve speed, usually a blistering blur that opponents barely have time to react to, was clocked at over 50 miles per hour slower than normal. Not just slow, unrecognizably slow. Embarrassingly slow for a player of her caliber. They were knocked out of the doubles, and Serena stood there in the locker room knowing what she had to do. Knowing and hating it with every fiber of her being. She called a press conference. Not after the match with Sharapova. Before it. Minutes before she was supposed to walk out onto court Philippe Chatrier in front of thousands of fans who had bought tickets specifically to witness this confrontation between two giants. Minutes before the cameras were set, the commentators were ready, and the entire tennis world had tuned in to watch history. And in that press conference, with the heartbreak written all over her face, Serena Williams withdrew from the 2018 French Open. She said the words clearly, and you could hear the pain in every syllable. She told the room that she had made a promise to herself, to her coach, and to her team. That promise was simple and unbreakable. If she could not compete at a minimum of 50 to 60% of her actual ability, she would not step onto the court. She was a mother now. She had responsibilities beyond herself. She had more to protect than just her pride and her ranking and her desire for another Grand Slam trophy. And physically, she could not serve. At all. Not in any meaningful way. And if you cannot serve in tennis, you cannot compete. It is that binary and that brutal. Think about what that moment cost her. Think about the journey she had already completed just to get to that press conference. The blood clots. The bedridden recovery. The long, agonizing, painstaking rebuilding of her body. The months of training with a baby daughter in the next room. All of it. Every sacrifice, every early morning, every painful session, every moment of doubt she pushed through. All of it led her to within a few hours of the match she had dreamed about through the entire recovery. And then her body took it away from her. She did not lose to Sharapova that day. She lost to herself, to her own biology, to her own physical limitations. And for a competitor of Serena's ferocity, there is perhaps no worse kind of defeat. Losing to an opponent across the net is painful, but it is clean. You shake hands, you process it, you go back to work. Losing because your own body betrayed you, because the muscles and tendons you have spent your entire life building and conditioning and honing simply gave out at the worst possible moment, that is a different kind of pain entirely. That is the kind of pain that doesn't wash off in the shower. Maria Sharapova advanced. The match that the world had been waiting for never happened. And Serena flew home, heartbroken, to Olympia and to the drawing board. But if you think that was the end of the body's rebellion, think again. Because the tennis gods have a particularly vicious sense of irony, and they were not done with Serena Williams yet. Wind the clock forward 3 years to Wimbledon 2021. By this point, Serena has returned to the tour, reclaimed her form in fits and starts, reached Grand Slam finals, and continued to compete at the highest level of the game despite being in her late 30s, an age at which most professional tennis players have long since collected their last trophy and moved on. She is extraordinary. She is defiant. She is, as always, absolutely refusing to age gracefully when aging ferociously is still an option. She tried to keep playing. This is the part that destroys people who really love Serena Williams, the part that reveals everything about who she is and what sport means to her. Injured, in obvious pain, with a leg that had no business carrying her across a tennis court, she tried to play through it. Because she is a warrior. Because quitting is not in her vocabulary. Because the idea of walking off center court without a fight is genuinely alien to her nature. But you can want something with every cell in your body and still be denied it. Eventually, after limping through a few more games, Serena's body gave her its final answer. She walked to the net. She conceded the match. And she walked off center court in tears, turning to wave at the crowd in what everyone watching felt might be a final goodbye, even if no one could quite bring themselves to say it out loud yet. Later, on social media, she wrote the simple, devastating truth. I was heartbroken to have to withdraw today. 8 words. 8 words that carried the weight of an entire extraordinary career.
It's been a year since we launched Win Beauty. Check it out. Hello, a year later. So we're doing like this really cool event in LA with Shopify. It's a pop-up. I love
An entire lifetime of sacrifice and dedication and relentless pursuit of greatness. 8 words from a woman who has never been at a loss for how to express herself, reduced to the simplest, rawest possible statement, because sometimes the truth is just too big for elaborate language. It was only the second time in her entire career that she had retired mid-match at a Grand Slam. In a career spanning over 2 decades, through hundreds of matches and thousands of games, her body had only truly given out on her in that specific, final, mid-match way twice. And both times, the heartbreak was total and absolute. Now, people love to talk about the failures of Serena Williams. They love to point at the incomplete comebacks, at the near misses, at the moments when the story didn't have the triumphant ending everyone wanted. But here is what those people consistently miss, what they are either too short-sighted or too cynical to properly appreciate. The fact that she was even there, at Roland Garros in 2018, at Wimbledon in 2021, is itself one of the greatest stories in the history of sport. The fact that she came back at all after nearly dying following childbirth, that she kept competing into her 40s against players young enough to be her children, that she refused for years and years to accept that her time was over. All of that is not the footnote to the story. All of that is the story. And the larger Serena narrative is very much still being written, because this woman does not do anything at half speed. When she finally officially retired at the 2022 US Open, the manner of her exit was perfectly, achingly Serena. She didn't go out in a singles final. She went out in the doubles draw, playing alongside Venus, the same way it had all started. 2 sisters from Compton, standing together on a tennis court one last time, the crowd on its feet, the whole world watching. From the beginning to the very end, together. And if you thought retirement was going to slow either of the Williams sisters down, you clearly don't know them at all. Venus, who is now in her mid-40s and who has refused with magnificent stubbornness to let anyone write her off, made a stunning return to the US Open in late 2025 after a 16-month absence from the tour. 16 months away, and she came back. Because she is a Williams, and Williams women do not go quietly into that good night. And as for Serena, the Stockton Street podcast has become one of the most anticipated new shows in the celebrity podcast space, with good reason. Every episode pulls back the curtain on the real Serena and Venus, the unfiltered, laugh-out-loud, brutally honest, deeply loving versions of themselves that the cameras only occasionally caught glimpses of during their playing days. We are getting the stories they never told during their careers. The secrets, the behind-the-scenes drama, the personal revelations that their public personas required them to keep tightly guarded for decades. It is everything that true fans of these 2 icons have always wanted, and it is genuinely wonderful. And through it all, through every injury and withdrawal and heartbreak and comeback, through the blood clots and the slippery grass courts and the promises made and kept and the matches that never happened, what remains is a legacy so enormous that it will take generations to fully measure it. Serena Williams didn't just dominate women's tennis. She transformed it. She made it bigger, bolder, louder, and more important than it had ever been before. She made little girls around the world who didn't look like traditional tennis players believe that the court belonged to them too. She made power and confidence and unapologetic ambition look not just acceptable in women's sport, but absolutely essential. The 2018 French Open withdrawal and the 2021 Wimbledon retirement are part of that legacy, not in spite of their heartbreak, but because of it. They show us the cost of greatness. They show us what it actually takes to compete at the highest level for as long as Serena did. They show us that even the mightiest champion bleeds. Even the most indestructible force has to bow to biology sometimes. And that keeping a promise to yourself, even when it breaks your heart wide open, is the most courageous thing a person can do. She made a promise. Her body put her in the most brutal position imaginable. Keep the promise and lose the match you've bled for, or break the promise and take the court at a fraction of yourself. She kept the promise. She always kept her promises. That is who Serena Williams is. That is why, no matter how much time passes, no matter how many new champions emerge and new records are broken, there will only ever be one Serena. And honestly, we should all be grateful we were alive to watch her. All right, Chatterbox family, I need to know where you stand on this one. Was the 2018 French Open withdrawal the single most devastating moment of Serena's entire career, knowing exactly what she had sacrificed just to get to that press conference? Or did the sight of her limping off center court at Wimbledon 2021 in tears break your heart even more? Both moments were absolutely crushing in different ways, and I genuinely want to hear what you think. Drop it all in the comments below, your full reaction, your analysis, your feelings, all of it. This is exactly the kind of conversation that makes the Chatterbox community the most amazing corner of the internet, and every single comment you leave means the world to this channel. If this deep dive moved you, excited you, or gave you a whole new perspective on the greatest tennis player who ever lived, then you already know what to do. Smash that like button right now. It takes 1 second, and it helps this channel more than you know. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss a single story we bring you, because we are just getting started and the tea we have lined up is going to be absolutely scalding. And ring that notification bell, because you do not want to be the last person in the Chatterbox family to hear what's coming next. This is Chatterbox. We tell the stories behind the stories, and we are so glad you're here for all of it. Until next time, stay chatty.